In this lesson, we're going to continue looking at solving quadratics. However, we're going to be solving quadratics by factoring rather than by graphing. So we're still finding the solution or roots or zeros like we talked about in our previous lesson, but we're going to be doing it by factoring. So the steps to do this is first, you want to make sure that your quadratic is set equal to 0. Then you're going to factor the left side, and then you're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. And then you write your answer. Let's take a look at these steps in action. Number 1, x squared plus 4x plus 3 equals 0. First, we need to make sure that it's set equal to 0 on the right, and it is. Then we take a look at the left side and we factor it. Remember, we always check for a greatest common factor first, and then we factor either the difference of two squares, a basic trinomial, the slip and slide method. This one is a basic trinomial, where we find two numbers that multiply to give me 3 and combine or add to give me 4. Those two numbers would be 3 times 1, because 3 times 1 is 3 and 3 plus 1 is 4. So then I would write that as x plus 3 times x plus 1. And don't forget to bring down your equal 0. Then in step 3, we're going to take each factor, so the x plus 3 and the x plus 1, and we're going to set each one of those equal to 0. One way you can do that is by creating a table and then factoring each side. So x plus 3 equals 0 and x plus 1 equals 0. And then solve. Remember, to solve, we're going to subtract 3 from both sides, and that gives me x equals negative 3. And then on the other side, we're going to subtract 1 from both sides, which gives me x equals negative 1. So when I solve this quadratic, I get x equals negative 3, negative 1. And remember, we're going to put that in a set of brackets. And if I were to visualize what this parabola looks like, I know that it crosses my x-axis at 2 points. Go ahead and highlight numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And let's take a look at number 7. So again, we want to make sure that it is set equal to 0, and it is. Then we look at the left side and we try to determine how we're going to factor it. Of all the methods we know to factor, this one is factoring a basic trinomial. So we need to find two numbers that you multiply to get 25 and combine or add to get 10. Those two numbers would be 5 times 5, because 5 times 5 is 25 and 5 plus 5 is 10. So when this quadratic is factored, we get x plus 5 times x plus 5 equals 0. Then to solve it, we're going to set up our table, and we're going to set each factor equal to 0. So x plus 5 equals 0, x plus 5 equals 0. We subtract 5 from both sides, which on the left we get x equals negative 5. We do the same thing on the right, subtract 5 from both sides, x equals 0 minus 5 is negative 5. Now, since I got the same thing when I factored it, I only have one solution. So x equals bracket negative 5 would be the solution to this quadratic. So if I'm visualizing what it looks like, it would cross the x-axis at 1 point. Go ahead and highlight numbers 8, and let's look at number 9. So again, number 9 is already set equal to 0. But when we look at the left side and we look at how we're going to factor it, we need to factor out a greatest common factor first. Our greatest common factor would be x. And once I factor out that x, I'm left with x minus 8. And we'll bring down our equals 0. What's left in parentheses, x minus 8, can't be factored further. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my table and set each factor equal to 0. On the left side, we just have x, so x equals 0. On the right side, we have x minus 8 equals 0. X equals 0, that's already solved for us, so we don't have to solve that. So on the right side, we just have to add 8 to both sides, and we get that x equals 8. So my two solutions are x equals 0 and x equals 8. And the way we're going to write that is x equals a bracket, 0, and then 8. So I know that this is going to be crossing, the parabola would cross my x-axis at 0, 8. Go ahead and highlight number 10. And let's look at number 11 on the next page. So my greatest common factor for number 11 would be 6x. And after I factor that out, what I'm left with is x minus 2. And don't forget, bring down equals 0. Then we will set up a table, because that's as far as it can be factored. And on the left side, I'll have 6x equals 0. And on the right side, x minus 2 equals 0. When I solve the left side, I solve that by dividing both sides by 6, and I get x equals 0. And when I solve the right side, I solve it by adding 2 to both sides, and I get that x equals 2. So my solution is x equals 0, 2. And that parabola would cross the x-axis at 2 points. Go ahead and highlight numbers 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And let's take a look at some examples that are not in standard form. So all the ones we looked at previously, it was already set equal to 0. The next couple we look at aren't set equal to 0. So number 17, you see it says equals 21. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to rewrite it. So we're going to have to move the 21 over to the left side so that I only have 0 on the right side. Remember, when it crosses over that equal sign, the sign of the term changes. So this is going to be x squared plus 4x minus 21 equals 0. Then from here, we can factor it like we did the previous problems. So for this one, a basic trinomial, we need two numbers that multiply to give us negative 21 and combine or add to give us 4. So we can go ahead and set it up. And those two numbers would be a positive 7 and a negative 3. 7 times negative 3 is negative 21. 7 minus 3 is 4. Once it's factored completely, we'll go ahead and set up our table, and we'll set each factor equal to 0. So x plus 7 equals 0, and x minus 3 equals 0. And then we'll solve each side of our table. So we'll subtract 7 from both sides, and we find that x equals negative 7. On the right, we'll add 3 to both sides, and we find that x equals 3. So our solution is x equals negative 7, 3. And again, we can visualize that this parabola would cross our x-axis at 2 points. Go ahead and highlight numbers 18, 19, and let's take a look at number 20. So number 20, we have two terms on the right side that need to be moved over to the left. When I move the 4x over, if you notice, I have another term that has an x. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to combine it with it. So when we move that 4x over, we're doing the opposite. So we're subtracting 4x. And we would do the same thing with the 1. When I move it over, there's another constant on the other side it can be combined with. So when I move it over, I'm going to subtract 1 from there. So what I'm left with is x squared minus 14x plus 48 equals 0, because both the 4x and 1 have moved over to the left side. So now I have a basic trinomial that I can factor. So I need two numbers that multiply to give me 48 and combine or add to give me negative 14. We can go ahead and set it up and then think about that combination of numbers. Since they multiplied to give me a positive 48, but when I combine them I get a negative, that tells me that both of my numbers need to be negative, and 8 times 6 is 48, and negative 8 minus 6 is negative 14. Once it's factored completely, we'll set up our table, and we'll set each side equal to 0. So x minus 8 equals 0, and x minus 6 equals 0. When I solve x minus 8, I get x equals 8, and on the right side I get x equals 6. So my solutions are x equals 6 and 8. And when you're writing your solution in your solution set, if you have two solutions, you want to write those solutions in order from least to greatest. Go ahead and highlight 21 through 24.